Welcome to the NLP View with your host, Donna Blinston. Each week, Donna will explore how the techniques of NLP can help improve your personal and professional life. And now, here's your host, Donna Blinston.
Hello and welcome to the NLP View. My name is Donna Blinston. Today's guest is Andrew Bendefy, author of the best-selling book, Seeing Spells Achieving. Neuro-Linguistic programming, NLP, is an approach to communication, personal development and psychotherapy. According to the charity British Dyslexics, the most successful way of teaching dyslexic students is to use a structured multisensory technique which combines visual, auditory and kinesthetic inputs so that the brain receives information in many different ways. NLP takes this even further by introducing a visual spelling strategy, teaching the student how to form mental pictures of the words, enabling them to see the word rather than remembering how to spell it. NLP refers to a stated connection between the neurological processes, hence neuro, language, linguistics, and behavioural patterns that have been learned through experience, programming. NLP addresses motivational and emotional issues that can improve learning abilities in both numeracy and literacy. Andrew Bendefy's book, Seeing Spells Achieving, is an easy-to-run, practice-orientated approach which teaches the reader how to visualise the words and break free from any limiting beliefs around their abilities. So I'd like to welcome to the show Andrew Bendefy. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Donna.
How are you?
Lovely to be here. Really well, thank you.
It's wonderful to have you on the show today, Andrew. It really, really is.
Thank you.
And, well, I want to personally thank you for writing your book, Dyslexia. Dyslexia was something that held me back in the past, affecting my self-esteem, my self-image, my confidence, and it caused me to place multiple walls in my own way. And I didn't believe I would ever be able to achieve, and then I could, and I can, and I am doing, and it's just brilliant. And that's all I can say, really. NLP has enabled me to conquer this and shine, and I feel honoured to interview you today, Andrew, because I know that your book and the work that you do will help so many people.
Oh, thank you. It's and it's curious that there's that word in there, beliefs. And sometimes when people do get to a place where they believe they can't do something, in this whole world of psychology and so on, there's a structure where beliefs drive behaviour. And when we think at a belief level, we will often ask ourselves the question, why? Mm-hmm. And why is a way of exploring beliefs. So when we explore behaviour, the question is what? And it's curious, when children are naughty, parents would often ask them the question, why did you do what you did? I.e., what was the belief that drove the behaviour?
Uh-huh.
That's so often the way things happen. And for so many individuals, if the belief is, I can't do this or I'm not going to get this, then the behaviour will match it. And it's helping to make that change to belief level, which will then drive the behaviour and the success. So it is lovely to hear that.
It is. And, well, before we go any further, could you please just tell our audience about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I started my professional life as a central buyer for a UK retail chain, and then moved on to a company well known in the States called the Xerox Corporation. For Xerox for just under 10 years. And then about 8 years ago, I had the opportunity to take a year out and do some studying. And at that time, the reason I chose to do it was because China and India were coming to town in such a big way with products at the same price, same quality, same lead time. Mm-hmm. I decided the differentiator in any business meeting would be myself. So I started studying consultancy and mentoring at the University of Hertfordshire, which then led me into Neuro-Linguistic programming, and then I also studied hypnotherapy with an American organisation, and then lots of other studies with group mastery. And after a while, it almost becomes a bit like playing in a sweet shop, and learning just becomes so much fun. And along those journeys, I met a lady called Olive Hickmott, with whom We jointly wrote Seeing Spells Achieving, and then we've both gone on now to work independently in so many different fields, just helping individuals to shine light on their own lives.
It's amazing work that you're doing. It's, as I'm repeating myself, but there's so much need for it. So I think there's a lot of stereism around dyslexia, and I think half of it is because people aren't aware of what's available.
Yeah.
Especially when people have got a milder form, when they just think that they're poor spellers, they haven't related that to the fact that it's actually a dyslexia, and that there's help there's help out there that they can use for themselves, and to acknowledge that the fact that they've got dyslexia isn't anything negative, bad, or any of the other connotations. It's actually a gift.
Yeah. And my framing on this is that people who have dyslexia are almost too intelligent for the world they live in, and very often they have the ability to run processes at 100 miles an hour, and they can see solutions that others can't see, and see ways of doing things. And you look at so many of the great inventors in history who've had dyslexia, and whilst it's brilliant having 100-mile-an-hour skills, the English language is something that has to be seen at 4 miles an hour, because it just has no logic to it. And it's almost a way of slowing down one's skills to see what's going on, and then once they've cracked it, they can pick up speed again.
Yeah.
So when I see clients privately, I'll normally see them for 2 1.5-hour sessions, approximately a week apart. By the end of the first session, children from the age of 6 upwards are spelling words like encyclopedia forwards and in reverse, and just going, this is like a game. And you can see their parents going, how is this possible?
Yeah.
And that works right the way up the age range. And it's just so rewarding, it brings learning back to life. And it's like the word education means to draw out or to lead, and you can see them drawing it out of themselves and going, all right, give me another one. I knew it wasn't me. And it literally becomes curious inquiry. So. And
do you find that a lot of it, not so much a lot of it, I don't mean dyslexia, but I mean the way that we're taught in schools doesn't lend itself to help children who are dyslexic, especially the way the books, because the books are full of pictures that will lead them to almost create pictures and create a story themselves, which doesn't always necessarily relate to the language that is used.
Yes, it's funny because within the English language, there's lots of words that are just kind of glue words that join everything else together.
Yeah.
So if I was to say one thing I often do with clients when we meet is I say, just close your eyes for a minute and imagine your best friend walks in the room. Now imagine they've dyed their hair bright pink.
Mm-hmm.
And now imagine both of you are standing in front of your fridge and just see yourself pulling open the fridge door. And just have a look and see where the milk is. And what's the colour of the lid on that? And they can pick it out immediately. And I go, I know for a fact that 5 minutes ago you weren't thinking about the colour of your milk bottle top lid. But you've just proved 3 things to me. Number 1 is, of course, you know what your best friend looks like. Number 2, not only can you remember that picture, but you can create a brand new picture of your own because your best friend doesn't have pink hair.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can remember pictures and you can create pictures, who's in charge of your pictures? Yeah, you are. And bang, just like that, you can find a picture. Now, guess what? The first stage of reading, writing, spelling, numbers is remembering a picture. And you're going to be really good at this because you've just proved it. And then off we just go down that road and just play with it. But the curious thing is, in the UK, the first words that schools are directed to teach to children are called keywords.
Yeah.
Now, if I was to say to anybody what colour's grass, or what colour's a banana, what colour's a strawberry, they can go green, yellow, red, and they've got those pictures there. But if I was to say what's an of, or what's a should, all those words have no, and should, would, could, in, on, the, but, and, so, what, where, when, why, if, of. So none of those words have pictures.
No, they don't, no.
And curiously, you can see children reading, and adults as well, and they'll very often skip those words out because they don't have a picture. They have no relevance. And 100 miles an hour, why do I need to slow down for those?
Yeah.
And you can sometimes see it when a child, for instance, might get told, come and sit down for dinner once you've washed your hands, and they sit down for dinner and they haven't washed their hands because the picture sequence of the sentence was come and sit down for dinner, wash your hands. Because the words once you have haven't got pictures. Yeah. And it's just enabling them to learn a process where they can start to visualize words and spot the mistakes. Because to listen to the word free and the word phone, one would think they both begin with the letter F. Yeah. And it was almost whoever was inventing the word phone decided they were going to have a laugh at our expense. and it's curious that on that note, in certain countries, they'll spell phone with the letter F rather than PH. And I've had clients who were diagnosed as dyslexic in English, but they're fine in Spanish, German, Italian, where the word phone would be pronounced pahone.
I see that a lot with clients and with my own family. My brother is now fluent in Welsh, and his Welsh is better than his English. And he'll find that he's 13, but he'll find that he'll think about it in Welsh to then go and think about it in English. Because in Welsh, they'll tell you what it is, and then they describe it. So they've got the picture, and then they're describing it afterwards. Whereas in English, it's the other way around. So he finds it a lot easier to, when he's trying to describe something, to automatically revert to Welsh, which isn't his mother tongue, yet it's a language that he finds a lot easier to explain things in.
Yes, and that reminds me of this. Very often I work with individuals who've grown up in another country and come to the UK, and they'll still be thinking in their mother tongue, which if it has a different phonetic structure to English, then they get suddenly told, we think you might have dyslexia. And it's not, it's just because they're thinking in a different language logic. Yeah. And especially in Europe now, with the whole joining of the European Union, there's very often people from Poland, Slovakia, Czech Republic coming to the UK, still thinking in their native tongue and really struggling with the English language. And for them, pictures is the only way out.
Yeah, it does make sense. Well, I've done it. I've been on that journey. I always visualize my words. And it's one of the first things that I notice when I'm working with clients who are coming with, usually it's a self-esteem, it's a confidence, it's a lack of ability to move forward. And half of that is because they feel that they're not good enough, or they can't do it, or they wouldn't be successful because of their dyslexia. And when I start talking about them and ask them, talking about their dyslexia and their reading, their writing, their numeracy, when I start talking about it, they're looking down to the floor because they've had a lot of emotion attached to it. And because they're looking at the floor, they're in their emotions. They're not able to look and visualize and look up at the words. And just by doing that and getting them to look up, to visualize the pictures, they're seeing the pictures, and not only are they able to see the words, spell the words, they're able to say and see so much more than they could before. Is that an experience I've seen that through your book, but what else have you found with your clients with things like visualizing and the movement from being down in the emotions to being able to, I suppose, stand up tall and know that you can spell and you can see the words in front of you?
Well, it's fascinating. I can ask children of any once they can converse, I say, so when we feel sad, where do we tend to look? And they go, we look at the ground. And I go, exactly. And there's even things in our language where we say, I'm feeling a bit down. Things aren't looking up. And it's just human nature. It's the way the brain's wired that when we go to that point, we look down. But then I say, have you ever noticed that time where you might have lost something and you look up at the ceiling and you go, now, where did I leave that? And they go, yeah. And I go, well, guess where your secret picture library is? Up there. And in the UK, many years ago, they used to say, what are you looking up there for? The answer's not written on the ceiling. Well, actually, yes, it was. That's why everyone used to look up there. And in that whole area around emotions, we mentioned approximately 10% of the English-speaking world have dyslexic tendencies. In the UK, now 20% have literacy and numeracy challenges. Within certain industries, within the fast-moving consumer goods industry, which is high-volume retail, distribution and so on, 40% of employees have literacy and numeracy challenges. Within prisons, 50% have difficulty reading and 80% have difficulty spelling and writing.
Wow.
So that's 4 out of 5. And there's a figure where the prolific persistent offenders, who are people who will leave prison and then go straight back and leave and come straight back, account for the vast majority of the prison population. And it's just frightening. And there's one other figure which was quoted to me, that 50% of entrants to the armed forces have a literacy and numeracy level below an 11-year-old. And there's twice, this was a few years ago now, it was about 3 or 4 years ago, at that time, there was twice as many people as were serving in Afghanistan who are now in prison in the UK.
Gosh.
And it's just a world, there's just people who at the time just didn't get it.
Yeah.
And it's such, if you think that's 1 in 5 people, so we will all know people who have challenges, and suddenly they go, I can get hold of this, I can do this. And it's just that liberator which enables them to move forwards and to own it.
Yes. And it is around that ownership. And I think, I especially found with myself, because you're told so many times in school, and from a family point of view, it was more of a laugh and a joke, or, don't ask Donna, she can't spell for toffee. So even though it was meant light-heartedly, when you hear it again and again and again, you believe it, and we've touched on beliefs, but we will link back to them. But I can imagine being as a child, and if you're told again and again and again that you're a rubbish speller, you'll soon turn that into that I'm stupid, or that I'm not good enough, and that I'm sick. And if that's a mentality that you're running, an identity level about yourself, you can see exactly why and how people end up in the position where they can't get a job, because when it comes to presentation, they've either struggled in the first place to do the application form, or not even got to that point and think, well, I can't fill it in, or they'll see that I can't spell, so they're not going to employ me. If they get past that point and they go to interview and they've got such a poor level of self-esteem and self-confidence that they don't get the job, and it's that whole self-fulfilling prophecy. So you can see where the attraction for crime and that whole lifestyle just arrives, because there's nothing else for them in their perception of the world. And half of it's just because they've not had that opportunity. And I know when we're talking about how dyslexic people, because they're all at least above average intelligence, they're running and working a lot faster. They've got a brilliant gift of being able to think outside the box and lateral thinkers. In school, they're often seen as the people that are troublemakers, disruptive and noisy, and it's not that. It's because they're bored.
Yeah.
They're already at the end of the class. It's like, come on, give me something to do.
And it's so funny when you mention that, because there's been a time when each of us has been watching a good movie on telly, and someone might come into the room and ask us something, and we just don't hear them because we're glued to the movie. Yeah. And then say something scary happens in that movie, and we take a little jump in our chair. It's not that there's a dragon in our room or a man with a gun, but we've just seen something visually, and it's caused us to take what they call a kinesthetic reaction. And for these individuals, at an other than conscious level, they can be running several movies in their minds. Yeah. And to pay attention to their movies, the first thing they have to do is stop listening to everybody else, exactly like we do when watching the telly. And then they might get told that they're daydreaming or not really paying attention. Well, actually, they are paying attention to something that's probably much more interesting than the person at the front of the classroom. Yeah. And the next thing that happens is all the thoughts that they're having just give them too much energy and they can't sit still. In the same way the horror movie makes us jump, the visual drives the kinesthetic, and you've got the beginnings of the ADD and ADHD, attention deficit disorder and hyperactivity disorder. So they get into school on day one, they're taught words that they can't visualise, and the first thing they go is, oh, I can't see that. Yeah. Anyhow, there must be something else. And they'll go off at 100 miles an hour and start to lose attention. And I run programs in schools that run over a few weeks and involve all the parents, the community, the teachers, and everybody. And at the end of it, these children are just getting top marks in their spelling, and they're jumping up the spelling groups, and they're just going, and it's just a complete engagement back in themselves and in their education.
It just gives me goosebumps hearing things like that, Andrew. It really does. There's one of a young, well, I say he's young, is 14 that I work with. I actually work with his mother, is what started it off. Yeah. And there was multiple things. Dyslexia was the primary thing, but she came with me for interview technique. And as we worked through, it was dyslexia was the undercore, and as she's transformed and she's just running 1,000 miles an hour at the moment, she's asked me if I'll work with her son. So I've started doing different things with regards to spelling, only just recently. And when she first approached me, she did say that my son's got ADHD, but nobody will ever confirm it, but he's always mad, chaotic, disturbing in school, etc., etc., what we've just touched on. When I sat and spoke to him, he was distracted. Half of it he didn't want to be there, and he was in a situation that he was put there by his mum. But when I asked him and just slowed him down, he was calm, collected, was listening to what I was doing because I paced him and I slowed him down, stopping him running as fast as he wanted to run.
Yeah.
And half of that, I asked him to find a spot in the room that he wanted to look at and just look at that one spot and see what he notices. And because of doing that, he turned off his movies, like you were just saying. And from that point on, we could then start to work together.
Yeah.
The mind, the brain is just, wow, it inspires me so much.
And it's curious, there's one thing, any listeners can try this with their own children. You can say, what letter comes after the letter B in the alphabet? And they'll say C. And you go, what letter comes after G? And they go, A, B, C.
Yeah.
And you can hear them running through it, because unless they start at A, they're not going to find it, which is an auditory process. There's nothing visual going on there. And those will, more often than not, those individuals will also have difficulties with their multiplication and division. Yeah. And there's the absolutely brilliant little game you can play. And if you try this now, just imagine up on the top of the wall in front of you or on the ceiling above your head, there's a triangle. And at the top of the triangle is the number 56. In the bottom left-hand corner is the number 7. And the bottom right-hand corner is the number 8. And now let's have a look at this. If we multiply the 7 by the 8, the answer's sitting at the top of the triangle, 56. And if we divide the 56 by the 8, the answer's sitting in the other corner, 7. And if we divide the 56 by the 7, there's the 8. And they just go, oh, I can do maths.
Yeah.
And suddenly, by the time they come back for the second week, they've cracked it. Because it's just a case of learning the pictures.
Yeah.
And it's that there's sometimes an acceptance of, oh, I'm rubbish at maths. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm just one of those people who doesn't get maths. And you just go, just try this for a minute. And they go,
yeah.
And maybe I do then. Ooh.
I used to struggle with maths, and half of the struggling with maths was I was fine that the calculations, you're adding your minus and your times table. It was whenever there was a sentence structured into it.
Yeah.
And I just didn't do it. I couldn't, because I was so lost in the wording of it that I couldn't. I spent more time trying to decipher what I was asked, and I never got to the point of looking at the answer. I couldn't separate them out.
Yeah. And it's curious, there was a program on Channel 4 at the beginning of 2010, and it was called Kids Don't Count, and it was all about the numeracy challenges within schools, again, where 20% of the population have numeracy challenges. And after the program was aired, I was invited to come along to the Channel 4 program review of what was aired, and there was several specialists from the field and some from business as well. There was Justin King from Sainsbury's and so on. And we had a chat, and then they said, any other thoughts? And I said, well, one thing is 20% of the population can't read. And they went, yeah, but this is about maths. And I went, yeah, but bear with me. When you look at the tests that they're doing, a certain percentage of the questions are comprehension maths. So the question might say there were 7 cars travelling at 4 miles an hour for 1 hour. How many miles did they do in total? Now, well, the actual question is, what's 7 times 4? But it was their English that let them down. So as long as 20% of the population can't read, they're never going to do any better in their maths. And they just went, that wasn't picked up in the programme, was it?
No.
And I went, there you go. So it's a curious juxtaposition, the way it all kind of starts to make sense. And it's almost like knocking dominoes over.
Yeah.
And, once one goes, and there's another one where sometimes individuals will go upstairs and they go, now, what was it I came upstairs for?
Yeah.
And their way of storing information is almost like point 1 will be directly in front of their face, point 2 will be behind that, point 3 will be behind that. So they can only see the points. So they go upstairs and go, now, what was it I came for? Now, imagine that as a spelling strategy where you've got all the letters one after another, rather than in a line running from left to right. And that's where individuals will spell, for instance, they'll spell the word remember and they'll leave out the E and the M in the middle.
Yes.
So there's a whole field around timeline therapy, and an awful lot of this can be linked with people's concepts of time and how they process information, which is part of the field of NLP or Neuro-Linguistic programming, and even down to individuals looking at obsessive compulsive disorder, having to run things in a certain sequence, and having to start at step 1, a bit like with the alphabet, having to start at letter A.
It's funny you mentioned timeline. I was with a client, I'm sure I mentioned it when I last spoken to you actually. I was with her again yesterday, and I've asked permission to share her story. With regards to timeline, with NLP, there's the theory of timeline is that in relation to where you are now, your past is in a direction from where your body is, as is your future. And if you think about where that is now and point to it, you'll notice that there's a line. When she was looking at her future curved up in front of her and was very much like a block wall in front of her. And for her, when I was started to work with her over her dyslexia and looking at her spelling and numeracy, when we started that path and I asked her to look up, she couldn't look up. And she didn't want to because she was hitting this wall. And it took us a few sessions until I started thinking, okay, what else could be going on? I started looking into timelines out of a curiosity to find that this was there. And if someone has got possible beliefs or limiting beliefs about them, they will put these walls up and blocks in their way so that they don't have to deal with certain issues.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I've come across a few times, and certain with this girl, just by slowly lowering that wall and giving her permission, she's enabled herself to visualize again. A thing that just wasn't there for her because she'd, in a way of self-protecting, she'd put this wall there. And it's just interesting how we all have our own coping mechanisms and way to deal with things, and it's not until somebody asks, what's going on? What about doing it this way? Have you thought about this? If somebody isn't there to offer that, it doesn't happen.
Yeah. No, it's just amazing. And even with children, I say, so if you were to think of last week, would last week be in front of you or behind you? And they go, well, that would be behind you, of course. And I go, next week, well, that would be in front of you. And I go, look, that's one way of thinking of time. And I go, some people who are really organised at time, and they always remember birthdays and dates and so on and so forth, their past will be to their left and their future will be to their right. And it's almost like they're running along a line going, well, that was in January, this is coming up in March, what we're going to do in December. And they've just got different ways of processing time. And it's those areas of that left to right approach is the perfect one for spelling, but the behind and in front of you one isn't.
Yeah.
And the one area where we were talking earlier about people who've had a rocky road in life, very often their past is sitting in front of them and their future's even further in front of that. Yeah. And what's the positive intention in not moving forward? Because I'm going to walk into my past.
Yeah.
And it's just, let's stay right where we are, because this is safe.
It is completely. And that's one of the things that I really liked about your book, is because it takes you through that journey of identifying with things like that. You start off getting people to acknowledge their beliefs, reframe what they believe about themselves currently with regards to the reading, the writing, the numeracy, what they believe currently, how they can reframe it and see it differently. And one of the things that really, I suppose, took a hold of me is when people tell you things like you are a rubbish speller or you'll never be able to spell. We often hold on to them. I certainly did, and a lot of my clients hold on to those as being truths and hold it at an identity level. And just by asking them to say, well, you know, whose life is it anyway, which is directly out of your book, and why should someone I haven't seen for many years still hold a power over me?
Yeah.
And I certainly had that. I had my school teacher did have a power over me. So whenever I thought about English and comprehension, for one, I automatically saw her, and in came all the negative connotations I had around her. And by being able to release that, I was then able to step forward. And it's that journey that you take people through in your book, where you're preparing them, getting them to acknowledge where they are, where they want to be, then learning how to visualize, then learning how to spell, seeing the words that can take, well, every reader through to shine, as you said in the beginning, to shine that light that's there already. They've got a dampener on it at the moment.
Yeah. And the amazing thing is, once they've got it, then they go with it. And where we've run programs in schools, one of the things that teachers particularly like is it doesn't mean they have to throw out everything they're already doing. They can pick and choose the bits and integrate it with their current processes. You know, and they just go, this would be really good for you doing it this way. And what I might do is mix this with this, which means it's a continually kind of evolving organism almost, or growth. And we'll see children playing with it in the playground and going, all right, let's try this. All right, I'm going to put a word on that cloud. You know, and off they go. And once they're peer mentoring or peer teaching each other, then you know you've cracked it.
Completely. I mean, we're referring here for teachers, but there's also the work the parents can do. Yeah. And the young boy that I mentioned earlier, that I'm working with, I asked his mum for his spellings and think extra, because he's going to extra English lessons. At the moment, he won't be going for much more, I'm sure. Yeah. But I've asked her to put his spellings on a bigger piece of paper to get him to colour them in and put them in his bedroom in his top left-hand field, so that they're there so he can see them, so that it's building his confidence. He's seeing the words, so he's immediately seeing the effects in school. And that's a trick that the parents can offer. Can offer for their children, as well as everything we've talked about. We have referred with regards to teachers, but parents to buy the book themselves to help their children.
Yeah, and curiously, there's at the beginning of November, there's an NLP conference in London that I've been invited to speak at, and I've been contacted by a number of teachers and also a number of parents just to check the details of the session. And they're saying, can we bring our children along and this and this? And it's just fascinating, that idea of, you know, everybody's involved in let's get this done and dusted now, and let's find new ways of playing with it almost.
Definitely. Well, Andrew, I could talk to you about this all day, all week. Can you tell, is there another book that you've got out from this? What's happening? And can you tell our audience how they can contact you, how they can buy your book and your subsequent books?
Called Seeing Spells Achieving. It's on Amazon. I have a InsideYourself.com.
That's InsideYourself.com.
Yeah, and my name is Andrew Bendefy, and thank you for listening.
Yes, audience, thank you ever so much for tuning in. It's been an honour having you today, Andrew. A real gift for me personally, because of the journey that your book took me through. And to all of our listeners out there, if you want to learn about how it can help you, please buy his book. It's a well worth read. If you want to learn about any more about NLP, then please tune in each week and also visit my website, www.donnablinston.com, where you can pick up a copy of my best-selling book, Psychobabble, a straightforward, plain English guide to the benefits of NLP. Thanks everyone for listening. Look forward to speaking with you next week.